Why don't you teach me how to maintain straight and level flight?
Okay. I'm assuming we're coming out of a climb, or I'll make this example out of a climb. So we start by pitching the nose down first and then reducing our power to around 23 or so RPM. We want to do it in that order because if we yank the airspeed in or the RPM back, we're just getting bad habits because your angle of attack is pretty high and you have low RPM, so you're probably going to slow down, and that could probably lead to a stall, probably not, but just a good reminder there. And then from there, we can trim out the aircraft. So usually try to hold the pitch that we're trying to maintain. We leave our RPM setting to, we won't touch it after we start messing with the trim because we're trimming for airspeed. And then from there, just release pressure and make adjustments as necessary
Okay.
on the trim.
Sounds good. What happens if I'm trying to maintain level flight and the nose is dropping, I'm losing altitude? How would I fix that?
So you could add a bump of power and retrim.
Okay. And what's a bump of power?
Oh, like 100
Okay.
RPM.
Okay, cool. Start with 100 and then go from there.
Yeah.
Sweet. And you could use your kind of cruise power as a reference starting point.
Hmm.
Awesome. Okay. And okay, what if I'm trying to maintain straight and level and I'm turning? How
And
would
you're
I correct
turning.
that?
So we have the diving tendency that occurs whenever you turn. So you can increase your angle of attack just a little bit,
Well, I mean,
and
I'm not meaning to, but like I'm trying to fly straight and it's turning.
the aircraft's just turning by itself.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's fairly common with a new student that they can't maintain heading.
What would I do? I could use cardinal headings to make it easier for them and give them a reference outside to try to point the nose like to that giant water tower or whatever
Mhm.
it is, and use like the finger method that you taught me, like your to maintain strain level, your two fingers from the horizon. If you
Mhm.
see more brown, you're descending, and then opposite for um, climbing.
Okay, good. And yeah, I guess I would add to that as well if they're turning, maybe they're just constantly uncoordinated. So that's a
Hmm.
common reason a student can be unable to maintain heading is just because they aren't putting in enough right or left rudder.
Hmm.
And so their wings level, but they're just slow and it's very slow, so they don't notice it. But after 30 seconds, they're 5 degrees off heading, and if they don't notice it for a couple minutes, I mean, I've seen students turn more than 90 degrees and not realize it. It's like
Oh,
it's
okay.
yeah, especially primary students, but it's it's more expected with a primary student. But then if you see that with a more advanced student, like a CFI applicant or something, like, this shouldn't be happening here. And then also they could just be banking. Sometimes people don't realize they're like resting their arm on the yoke or something like that.
Okay.
You can teach students to rest depending on what seat they're sitting in. Well, I guess either seat they're flying with their outside arm, so you could teach them to rest their arm that's on the yoke on the side of the air, on the where the window is,
Mhm.
something like that, or on their leg in a way they can brace their arm.
Cool.
Just a note as well, when I take a student out that's brand new, I really like to have them try and maintain airspeed. So I'll have them do a constant speed climbs, constant speed descents. I think that is just really, really like with all the turns, climbs, and descents and all of that. In my experience, I feel like that's the most beneficial out of all of those. But when you first take them out there, like that first flight or two, the whole flight doesn't necessarily have to be turns, climbs, and descents, but go and just put them through the ringer and try to get them to the point where they can handle like climb at 70. Now pull your power to idle and maintain 70 all the way through pitching down into a descent and now climb at 500 feet per minute and then get them to the point where they can do those things while they're turning and stuff. Be a really good start for the student there.
Cool.
Uh,
Thanks.
yeah. Why don't you teach me a maneuver? You can pick a maneuver that you feel like you need a repetition to teach.
No, I feel good with Star.
Do you feel good with teaching the eights on pylons?
I think so. Um, I can try it on pylons.
Okay.
Okay, so eights on pylons, we want to pick our pivotal altitude first is the most important part. So we're going to fly into the downwind and take a note of our airspeed or our ground speed right there. And then we'll pick our pivotal altitude through a chart that I have right here. I would eventually share it with the student. But pivotal altitude is dependent on your ground speed, and there's formulas for it. So our plane, we have ground speed in knots, so it's ground speed squared divided by 11.3, and then we add our altitude or our mean sea level to that. So once we find that, we want to look for obstructions, make sure that there's nothing around us, a good open field, a good area to do eights on pylons. So you can do corner and corner, but we enter 45 degrees into the downwind, and the student will probably be to the left. So we will start probably to the left. For all of that, we would look for a safe place to land, of course. But from there, we'll start our bank towards the direction of it and use pitch to maintain our pylon right directly under the wing. If we feel like we are behind the pylon, we can start to pitch down. And from there, if it's in front of us, we can start increasing our altitude. But because it's related to ground speed and we're entering into the downwind, here, let me kind of draw it. In the beginning, we'll start heading. Oh, wait, hold on, I drew it wrong. In the beginning, we'll be towards the downwind, so our ground speed will be faster. And then once we're starting to turn away from the wind, we'll start pitching upward just because our ground speed is slower, and the slower you are, sorry, we'll start pitching downwards. So the slower you are, the lower your pivotal altitude. And then once we do our second sort of little part of the bow tie, I'm struggling. My phone is dying. Sorry.
Oh,
So right around here, we're headed back towards the downwind and we're climbing back up to our original pivotal altitude, and we'll probably start pitching upward. And then a similar thing once we're over here. So we're still in the downwind and then headed back towards the headwind here. And then we'll be pitching downward to catch up to it. Throughout the whole maneuver, we'll be taking a peek outside and inside, making sure we're coordinated, traffic is good, if there's any sort of towers. But I like to pick out my first pylon to the left first, and then once I'm crossing over here, wings level, I'll find something to a suitable distance, about a mile or so is good. And then throughout, well, we're from here to here, we'll be level for about 4 to 6 seconds, something like that. Gives us enough time to be a beam of something else.
okay. Is that everything?
Yeah, I need to pull up the standards for it real quick. Oh, actually, the airplane flying manual has a really good picture with like the wind and pivotal altitude and all of that fun stuff. I list out the common errors, so failure to adequately the area, establish constant level altitude throughout the maneuver, or entering prior to entering the maneuver, and the standards, which are not on my lesson plan.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool. So I would at the end ask, do you have any questions? And then I would also just at the beginning get in the habit of stating the objective for the maneuver. So with this one, we're going to demonstrate maintaining our pivot on a point with our ground speed, using our pitch to change our ground speed to correct for the wind so we can have a constant pivot.
Okay.
Just stating something like that at the very beginning so the student kind of understands before you just kind of dive into explaining it. Because if you remember, I mean, pivotal altitude, you're going to have a commercial student already there, but for a private student, like a primary student, a lot of this is going to be completely new. Even some of the language is going to be new. So just starting simple in the beginning before you get into the weeds of the maneuver could be helpful. So, yeah.
Okay.
So like S turns, for example, you could say S turns a maneuver where we're going to have a line. We're going to do S turns across the road, and we're going to demonstrate correcting for wind using varying bank angle in the turns. And then this is how we do it and get into it further from there.
For sure. Okay.
Sweet. So you will explain one maneuver on the check ride. I think a lot of times they pick a ground reference maneuver for those, seems like.
Okay.
Let's see. Oh, one thing that I wanted to ask you, this was something on my MEI that I was asked because I did my MEI first. I remember he really wanted me to know the private pilot eligibility requirement, aeronautical experience requirements, and privileges and limitations. Do you know the eligibility requirements for private?
They need to be 17 years old, read, write, understand, and speak English, and then have the three documents, medical, US government ID, and student pilot certificate, and then the experience, like the whole 40 hours minimum, 20 dual, I believe. And then the solo requirements, so 10 hours of solo, 5 hours being cross country, and then the rest, whatever they want it to be. And then 3 hours of foggle time and 3 hours of nighttime with the nighttime cross country.
Okay. And what are the privileges and limitations?
They are allowed to act as PAC in an aircraft. They can't be compensated. They can't be paid to fly unless it's accidental for a business. They can do the glider towing.
Did you
There's some
say
like,
did you say accidental?
yeah,
Incidental.
accidental.
Incidental. Very different meanings there.
And then the pro rata share.
Okay. All right. Did you say the salesman? Did you say that one?
Yeah, they can
You did.
demonstrate.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Let's see what else. How do you feel with the Navlog?
I feel good. I have like maybe 20 or so bullet points on going and walking through a nav log. I can do that.
Mhm. Cool. How long is that, do you think?
How long is it?
Mm. How long do you think that one would take?
Like explaining a nav log?
Your bullet point stuff.
Oh, I can show it to you.
Okay, yeah, I'm just kind of curious what you've got.
Yeah, I have a Google Doc.
Oh, I see it. Mm, My service is really weird here. Uh, my phone has been like not working. Let me try and get it on my computer. Okay, cool. So you've got everything in the chronological order here. Probably good on that. We don't need to go through a whole
Mhm.
navlog. If you do want to send me, if she does give you a navlog, if you want to send it to me, I'd
Mhm.
be happy to take a look at it though.
Thank you.
Sweet. See what else. I think for the most part that's good. I'm just kind of checking to see if there's any last things here. Oh, here's a big one. What is density altitude and why do we care about it?
It's pressure altitude corrected for non-standard temperature. I like to think about it like the temper or the altitude that the aircraft feels like it's flying at. It's affected by the altitude that you're at, the temperature outside, and the humidity. So the altitude you have, so if you're taking off in a Cessna 172 in Colorado versus here, or maybe Corpus Christi, where it's like exactly zero for the mean sea level, you'll have less performance coming out of the one in Colorado, therefore a higher density altitude, humidity. So your fuel air mixture will have less of a percentage of air going into there because the water is taking up the little molecules or the space in there. Same with your lift being produced and the thrust produced, your propellers and airfoils, so less thrust will be produced, less lift will be produced, and less power from the engine. And with temperature, hot air, the air molecules are more spread out compared to colder, denser air. So the performance during a climb, during takeoff, so you'd use more runway on a hotter or higher altitude or more humid day. But yeah,
Okay. How is your ground roll affected on landing by
with
higher?
higher density altitude, you would use more runway to land.
Okay, well, why would that happen on landing?
It's a good question. I just always kind of associated it with like headwind versus tailwind.
We'll say headwind being the same across the board.
Okay. I'm not entirely sure. I'm thinking your ground run being shorter during takeoff, but I can't kind of click it with it being during
Hmm.
land.
Well, yeah, because That's why I asked it that way. On takeoff, it makes a lot more sense because you have the prop spinning. It's like things aren't producing as much. But on landing, all you've really got is your brakes, and it's not really helping or hurting with your propeller. In fact, maybe it's helping a little bit having less thrust from the propeller on landing, but it's because before the touchdown, we have a higher ground speed, right?
Hmm.
So by the time we touch down, we're touching down at a faster ground speed.
Okay.
Yeah, for the same actual speed through the air.
Okay.
Cool. And then let's say you are taking off, and we'll say you're in northern Arizona, up in they have mountains
Hmm.
up around 10,000 feet or so. So you're up there at one of the airports. Let's say the airport has 6,000 foot field elevation and got a like an 8,000 foot runway, and you're taking off in a Cessna. At what point, we'll say you calculated your performance and everything looked good, but at what point on the runway would you make the decision to abort a takeoff if you didn't feel good about the performance?
So there's obstructions as well.
No obstructions, but we'll say there's rising terrain. And
Okay,
when I'm saying this scenario, there's an actual airport I'm thinking of that is this way.
cool. I would say once I'm at it's a 8,000 foot run. What's
Mhm,
a 8,000 feet?
mhm.
Around 2,000 feet left. So at 6,000, I would start thinking.
Okay. Yeah. That it's good to have just something where if if you're in a high density altitude environment, just be thinking about that. If it's not looking good by this point, you could pick somewhere on the runway. You could use the
Mhm.
taxiways or something, pick a point down the runway. But also something to keep in mind is just because, like, let's say you do finally get off the ground at 6,000 feet down the runway. If it takes you that long to get off the ground, you may not have the performance to climb over rising terrain as well. So something to keep in mind.
Okay.
Cool. What else? What else? What's basic VFR weather minimums in class Delta airspace?
In class Delta,
Hmm.
it's 3 statute miles of visibility, 500 below, 1,000 feet above, and 2,000 horizontally.
Okay. What's special VFR?
We use it to get out of rough weather around our airport, and hopefully there's better weather towards our destination. We use it in the daytime, and we have to request it to ATC. They can assign it to us or suggest it. We would have to require or stay 1 statute mile or clear files and 1 statute mile of visibility at least to do it.
Okay. And what's the purpose of it?
Just to get out of the airport into better conditions.
Cool. Good. Okay. Let's see. And if you want to do it at night, what do you have to have?
You have to be on an IFR flight plan or
Instrument rated and IFR airplane.
okay.
I don't believe you have to be on an, yeah, because you're VFR, your special VFR.
Oh,
Yeah. Uh, that confused me for a second. Okay, what is gyroscopic precession?
so if a force is felt on a gyroscope, it's felt 90 degrees into ahead and into the direction of the spin.
Okay, so why does that matter to us?
Mainly our heading indicator would cause errors between the heading indicator and our magnetic compass, that and friction, but also the left turning tendency, mainly in a tailwheel aircraft. But
Okay,
we would feel it a little bit.
okay, cool. Yeah, Chimango motor
Mhm.
glider that has the worst gyroscopic precession of any plane from the propeller I've ever experienced. It's so bad. I don't know if I told you that but before, but you'll be full right rudder and it'll still be going left if you're not careful. Yeah. So generally just leave the tail down on takeoff is a good practice.
Okay.
Um, what is a special flight permit?
Special flight permit. If for any reason our aircraft is unworthy and um we need to get maintenance done on it, or if it's a new aircraft and it's getting delivered, or for any sort of like natural disaster reasons, we're trying to get the aircraft away from it. We apply for a special permit to the FSDO, explaining why we are flying this unairworthy aircraft. We let them know our route, the crew members on board, and the time and the purpose of it.
Okay. What's a good example for a scenario where the FAA might actually be inclined to give you one?
So maybe a flight school in Florida when it's hurricane season, they're
Yeah.
just moving their aircraft.
Okay. Good. It's a good example. Okay. How do you feel with the sectional chart? Did we go over a sectional chart?
Hmm.
We did. Okay.
Yeah, I was looking over the legend a couple hours ago.
Cool. Okay. Sweet. Should be good on that then. How do you feel on the FARs, the regulations?
I feel okay about them. Maybe like the instructor ones
Okay.
are a little rusty, like knowing like 6187 versus the commercial one, like that type of thing.
Okay. Well, you're not necessarily expected to have the regulation numbers memorized.
Hmm.
Just knowing where to quickly find it and knowing the content of them, I think is fine.
Hmm.
And then you know where in the FAR you'd find if there was an accident or incident, if it needs to be reported.
Is it, it's like 840,
8:30, yeah.
30?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, the easiest way to find it, if you look on the side of the FAR aim, like the where all the pages are, and it has like some of the gray things on the side. Do you see that?
Yes.
The there's the one the first like row that's going down, the end of that row at the bottom, I believe is part 830
Okay.
is the easiest way to find it.
It's like right before the aim part.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. Okay, I found it.
cool.
Cool.
So again, with that one, doesn't necessarily need to be memorized, but just knowing where to access it quickly and showing your students where it is.
Mhm.
That one also brings me to the 1552 with the TSA stuff. So let's say that you're teaching a student and their spouse wants to come and learn from you as well, but the spouse is waiting on their green card. Would you be able to provide training to them?
No, I could probably do a discovery flight though, I believe. But I'd have to wait until they have TSA clearance.
Okay. Yeah, they would need TSA approval to do that. So well, I know we've talked about that before. So they would need green card or some kind of visa or something like that and
Hmm.
TSA approval. Okay. Let's see. What records are you required to keep as an instructor?
Any endorsements that I give for a knowledge test, practical tests, and the results from them. I think same for the knowledge test, and any sort of like solo endorsements as well.
So, okay. We'll just go through the other scenarios as well. For the cross country solo, what are those endorsements?
Any sort of initial cross-country solo, so endorsement stating that they've received cross-country training in the specific category of aircraft, and the flight planning one, that somebody, a flight instructor reviewed it, and then the solo cross-country endorsement that they can do the solo cross-country.
Okay, cool. So the cross country planning, cross country training, and current 90 day. And who can give the cross country planning?
Any instructor,
Okay,
not
but
the.
the training has to be done by their instructor who provided the training.
Mhm.
Cool. And then the checkered endorsements for private.
So reviewing any deficiencies in a knowledge test, that one, they've received training within the last 2 calendar months, and the endorsement stating that we're endorsing them. We think they're ready for the check ride.
Okay, so you said deficiencies, 2 calendar months, and they're proficient for the check ride.
Hmm.
Okay. Are there any other endorsements?
Oh, the original one for the knowledge test.
Like the endorsement to take the knowledge test?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Yeah, cool. Endorsement to take the knowledge test.
Oh, ground training as well?
There's no
No.
endorsement for ground training.
Okay.
Cool. And then is there anything different for the commercial check ride endorsements?
I don't think so. I think I remember only getting two endorsements for my commercial check ride. The knowledge test,
Um,
full test.
you should have had at least three, probably four. Did you get 100 on the written?
No.
Okay, then you should have had four, the same four.
Okay.
Just the 6139 ones are the same. You just write the different name of the test. The other ones, you instead of 61, 103, 105, they're tied, 123, 25 kind of thing
Okay.
for the commercial, but they're yeah, all same four endorsements.
Four endorsements. Okay.
Mhm.
Right.
And then of course if there's any added category class or whatever, there's all those additional endorsements. All that stuff's fairly straightforward though. If there's any, questions about that with the additional endorsements, the big additional ones, you've got the flight review. So if you give a flight review, putting that in their logbook, make sure you have the training in the logbook and the endorsement that match each other.
Okay.
Complex, high performance, pressurized, and tail wheel, your 6131. And then your retesting after failure, and then added category class. I would say those are the most common ones that we use in the normal flight training environment. And then in the beginning of the 6165, you've got all your student pilot endorsements. So some of your funky solo endorsements, right? Your 25 nautical mile, your repeated, not more than 50, Class B airspace, Class B airport. But that is the bulk of it there.
So for the, I might be overthinking it, but the repeated solo cross country, that one, would that just be I I put it in um for like the route from I don't know, like Redbird to Athens and I put two specific dates for it, or it's valid for 90 days, or how does that work?
So the other cross country endorsements, those have to be given every time,
Hmm.
every solo flight. So this one's just that you don't have to do it every single flight, but they're still going to need the current 90-day solo flight endorsement as well.
I see. Okay. It's just the route. I see. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. They've received the required training in both directions between and at both airports is what the endorsement reads. And they're proficient to conduct repeated solo cross-country flights over that route, subject to the following conditions.
Okay.
So yeah, if someone was flying to Redbird to do training with you, then that would be a good example of why you may give them that endorsement.
Hmm.
Cool. Well, that's good with endorsements. Oh, and then just remember the very last parts of the advisory circular aren't really applicable for the stuff we're doing with the night vision and stuff. And then if you're looking up anything for instructor, just make sure you don't get confused between sport and instructors other than sport. Um, just
Oh,
can be a little confusing there.
okay.
But the only stuff that she should have you talk about with the instructor endorsements at all is if you're doing an add-on for a CFI. So if they got their MEI and you're training them for their CFI add-on,
Okay.
would really be the only scenario.
Yeah.
In that case, remember you'd need to give them the added cat in class. Talked about the high altitude stuff the other day. Oh, I took a picture for you, by the way, of our oxygen system, so I could send it to you.
Oh, cool. Thanks.
I'll show you now, but then I'll text it to you. So we've got our the two red tabs I told you about. So you squeeze those and you can just pull the whole thing out and it will inflate the little octopus
Hmm.
tentacles to go around your head. And so then in our pre-flight, the red knob under there, and then there's another knob or the black tab there. You push the red and you pull the black down. And then on this screen, you can see, I know it's backwards for you, but our oxygen level there. So it's showing
Hmm.
1550, 1590 PSI. So when I check that, I can make sure that the oxygen line doesn't go empty. Because if it does, then that means that it's not connected to the tank, right?
Hmm.
So just maybe some good correlation there, but I'll send those to you. Cool. That's pretty much the whole ACS there. We've talked about all the flight stuff, so I guess just some refreshers for you for the flight. Always coordination um, for when you're teaching. There's going to be maneuvers where you're teaching in flight. Just don't let that be a distraction from actually flying the plane. If you need to pause for a second from explaining something, that's fine.
Hmm.
Um, and let's see, on the eights on pylons, just make sure you're keeping constant bank angle for the entire maneuver and really emphasizing that you're using your pitch to speed up or slow down. Let's see what else. With the landings, it sounds like you worked that out on your solo flight today. But were you having that at all? That do you kind of feel like you got the sight picture dialed in from the right seat?
Yeah, I think there were only two where I was like a little bit yawed, but I was definitely center line. But the wind was picking up throughout the whole thing. But it was cool. I liked it.
Sweet, sweet. And then yeah, short field, power off 180. Don't be short. Would rather be long than short
Hmm.
on those. Make sure you do your crack before the maneuvers. Don't rush through
Hmm.
them, and don't rush setting up a maneuver, especially if you're teaching. Just take your time. It's not worth rushing through those. And that's all the big stuff. Oh, and then with the steep turns, don't overemphasize the back pressure that's needed when you roll in.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
that's really it. Everything's been really good on the ground and the flights, so I definitely think you're ready. I think you're gonna do a great job.
Yay, thanks.
Yeah. Do you have any questions for me?
Um, no. I think I feel good. Today's flight definitely helped a lot with my confidence, so thanks for
Mhm.
letting me.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Honestly, that's probably like an ideal way to do it.
Hmm.
Sweet. Yeah, I like when I just did my glider stuff on the way to the check ride, just soloed out there. It's a nice warm up confidence boost.
Hmm.
Sweet. Do you have a good check ride checklist?
Um, no, I'll probably get there early and try to take everything.
Okay. I've got a check ride checklist. I'll look for that in a second, and send it
Okay,
over to you. I've got a pretty extensive one. So,
sweet.
all right. Well, have fun. You can do
Hmm.
great. So,
Thank you.
yep. Have a good one.
You too. I appreciate
Yep.
it.
Yep.